they want we all want to lose weight, but not at the sacrifice of our muscle mass. And so this is what I'm going to teach you today is how you can burn that belly fat, lose that adipose tissue, that dangerous stuff that's toxic for your body, that so-called VAT, the visceral adipose tissue, which is the fat that kills you. It's that stuff that lines your organs. It's around the liver. It's basically what's at the root of things like fatty liver. It lines the omentum all around the gut. It lines the kidneys. Like this is the visceral fat, the stuff that like makes your belly kind of tight. And you're like, what the? It's not the little stuff on your arms or the back of the arms or back of the legs. That subcutaneous fat. That's not the stuff that'll kill you. It's the visceral fat that literally is the one that's damaging. It's the one that creates all those oxidized chemicals that literally put your body in a state of inflammation. It's the inflammatory fat. So we want to be able to lose that fat, but not at the expense of muscle. Remember those days where we used to talk about, everything was fat free and that was sort of the panacea, right? It was always this kind of fat free this and fat free that. And, it was kind of initially a good thing because, if we're eating in those days, it was all of the substitute or what we would call nowadays, most people don't even know about this stuff, but it's the hydrogenated fats that we were actually trying to avoid. We were trying to avoid that fake butter stuff, the I can't believe it's not butter that my mom used to buy. And we had no idea, right? The country crock, the this and the that's that were told to us that, oh, these aren't the bad fats. These are the ones that you should buy. You can't eat real butter. Like, this is crazy that was taught in my lifetime. And now we know the total opposite of this, that real, healthy, normal kind of fats that come from nature, whether it be if you're eating the whole animal and you're eating the fat tissues of the animal and you're eating natural butter, grass-fed, hopefully butter if you can access it, right? And these things that come straight from the animal or straight from the healthy plants, like you're using avocados like I love. This morning I cooked with some avocado oil, or I often use coconut oil. Then I use my favorite Evo or the extra virgin olive oil for my dressings. Like if you use these natural fats and natural oils, like you're good, but you don't want to use those substitute, those fake fats, if you will. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about today is losing the fat, but without losing your mind, right? And without losing your muscle, because muscle is literally the most important ingredient for, I would say, longevity, but also for vitality, for living right now in the present, at your best, doing your best with the most energy, chutzpah, vitality, dynamo, animo, as they say in Spanish. You got to have muscle mass. This is the key to longevity. It is the key to living a great life. And it's just the key to feeling great on a daily basis. So we're going to talk all about that. And firstly, as I kind of shared just a moment ago, all fat is not created equal, right? The fat we're really trying to lose is the V as in Victor, the VAT, the VAT. Like think of a vat of brew, right? You want to lose the VAT, which is the visceral adipose tissue. That's the one that I was sharing that's around your organs. It's in your belly. That's the fat that makes you sick. It's inflammatory fat. Hopefully you're getting measured your inflammation markers like the highly sensitive CRP or C-reactive protein. And a lot of what will trigger that to go up is having more visceral fat, because this fat is inflammatory. It's not the fat that you want. You want the brown fat, if you will, the fat with a whole bunch of mitochondria that is actually doing work for you, like the fat that babies have, for example. You know how babies are so cute and they're cuddly and they look a little puffy and chubby, in their cheeks and around their arms, and they got these fat rolls. That's actually a good kind of fat. That's not visceral fat. That's subcutaneous fat. And actually, babies themselves have a lot of this brown fat. And a couple of things I'll share today will actually help us to learn how we convert regular fat into the brown fat, which is the fat that actually is more metabolically healthy. So, like I said, all fat is not created equal, but we really want to get rid of that visceral fat because that's the stuff that will harm us, right? That's the inflammatory fat. And so what's interesting is that right now, there's this sort of I don't want to call it the easy button, right? That many of you have heard of, and many of you may have tried it. And I'm not saying I've never utilized it in patients or clients, or they have maybe utilized it from time to time. And that's the so-called GLP-1s, There's a place for those. And it has a place with certain individuals. Like I've even seen some friends and family use them, especially those that are already type 2 diabetics, because this does help. But one thing I would say, and I've shared about this ad nauseum at full length and detail in at least two other podcasts I've already done on the semaglutides, for example, right? The Ozempics, Mounjaros. Like I've already shared about this in other podcasts. So I'm not going to get too much into the weeds about it. But what I will say is if you're on one of these medications, whether it's a regular dose, a micro dose, whatever it is, you got to pay attention to what you're eating and what you're doing behaviorally, because all of these meds, guaranteed for almost all people, they do lose weight. They are losing weight, which at first glance, like that's what they want. People want to lose weight, but not at the expense of losing muscle. And depending on what reports you look at, the the authors and doctors you trust and whatnot, this has been reported from everywhere between 15 to 44% of the weight that you lose on these type of medications, let's call them the Ozempics, etc., the semaglutides, and so on, the GLP-1s. These can cause up to 40+% lost weight in muscle mass. So this is what they call the fat-free loss. Like you don't want, this is the case where you don't want to lose the fat-free cells, if you will, which would mean that you're losing muscle, right? You do want to lose the fat, but you don't want to lose the fat-free volume or the muscle. You want to keep your muscle and keep all of your muscle. And even if you can do even better than keep and you can build muscle in the process of losing weight, you are well on your way to not only weight loss, but your metabolic panacea, which is where your metabolism is supercharged, it's working well, and that's when you focus on muscle. So when you are trying to lose weight, make sure you don't do it at the expense of muscle mass loss. And so you want to not lose the fat-free volume. You actually want to just lose the fat only and not the muscle. And so if you're on one of these medications, the semaglutides, you got to pay really close attention to your diet. You want to stack it with protein first, protein forward. That's always what I recommend, is start your plate with protein. You guys are going to get tired of me talking about protein because it's so important to stack your diet in your favor. Because if you get adequate protein and you're doing the resistance training, it's going to be a lot less likely that you're going to lose muscle mass when you're losing weight. And right now, that's the average, that's the norm, and that's what's happening. And especially when you throw in one of these agents, one of these drugs, the semaglutides, the GLPs, for example, you tend to be losing more muscle than you should be. Because why? Well, duh, you're not eating much. You're losing, you're in a caloric deficit, and you're losing everything. You're losing fat, you're losing muscle, and this is not good. You want to retain your muscle. The best way I know to do that is a protein first, a protein forward diet, and including resistance training 2 to 4 days a week. We'll talk about that ad nauseum here a little bit more, but don't forget the power of muscle. Muscle is the key element for metabolism, the key element for vitality, the key element for longevity. And so we're going to talk a lot about those things here. So right now, let's talk about what you can specifically do training wise to salvage and not only not lose, maintain your muscle, but building muscle. So you've got to do resistance training. Back in the day, we just called it lifting weights, going to the gym, pumping iron, if you will. Nowadays, we throw this cool new buzzword, RT, or resistance training, because I don't know, we think that if we call it by a different name, maybe more people will do it. Well, I hope that that's the case. We need to be doing more resistance training, because for many years, we've been hyper-focused on just cardio, if you will. And I'm cool with cardio, the 150 minutes per week minimum that the American Heart recommends. I would say absolutely. I personally do more than that. I love cardio, but cardio alone is not enough. I'll say that again. Cardio alone, not going to cut it. Not enough. It's a great start, but you have to include, I would say, minimum 2 days a week of good old-fashioned pumping iron, weight training, resistance training, whatever you want to call it. That's the most important thing, 2 to 4 days a week, so that you prioritize your muscle and you don't lose it. And actually, if you build it, you're even building a more metabolically healthy powerhouse, if you will, for your metabolism. In the short term, it helps with your overall daily energy. And also long term, this stuff burns fat while you sleep. So do you want to learn how to burn fat while you sleep? I'm going to teach you right now. It's called muscle resistance training, preserving your lean mass. Okay. So this is what you do in the setting. Usually it's at the gym because with weights, it's a little bit easier. You can do it with body weights if you incorporate the different movements that'll be most helpful, like squatting, right? Like I'm doing air squats here while I'm talking to you. I always work from a standing desk almost always because I just love to move. There's actually this phenomenon, or they've given it a name nowadays, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT, like NEAT, it's an acronym for this, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which means that you are burning calories, you are burning fat without really thinking about it. You're not incorporating a specific movement pattern like I'm going to the gym for an hour, or I'm doing my 30-minute walk, or my 30-minute run, or bike ride, or for me, mountain bike, or surf, or whatever. It's not a specified duration of a specified activity, riding the bike, treadmill, stairs, elliptical, whatever that thing is. It's just moving your body throughout the day. This is what I love to call the exercise snacks. You just got to keep moving. The likelihood of staying moving, which we all want to do in our 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, is actually based upon how much movement we do now. Because if you stop moving now in your 30s, 40s, 50s, I'm telling you, you're going to be hard pressed to be moving and active in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. As they say, lose it, or I should say, use it or lose it. You got to move it or you're going to lose it as well. You got to move. You have to move. So I love this non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's basically kind of fidgeting, if you will, right? Back in the day, kids had fidget spinners. Today, present day, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I have one of these wrist devices. This is my modern day 2026 fidget spinner. Whenever I'm bored or I need to get my angst out, I grab my little wrist cruncher here, the wrist grip exercise, and I do fidget spinning, if you will, with my grip strength, because that's actually another thing that can be correlated directly with longevity. And I've talked about that before, but fidgeting is not a bad thing. My wife has accused me of being a fidgeter, if that's a word, or fidgeting too much. I'm always kind of moving. I can't sit still. I do take some time. We always have at least one movie night. Usually it's on a Friday night. We'll sit together as a family. I sit and cuddle with my kids. Oh, it's so nice still to have. Got a couple of my youngest are still in that cuddling mode. My 8-year-old and 10-year-old. Sometimes even my 13-year-old will still cuddle. And I appreciate that. I do sit back, relax, enjoy, watch a little movie night with the fam, one night a week, and I cherish that. And so it's fine to not fidget some of the time, but more often than not, just don't forget to move throughout your day. If that means incorporating a standing desk, if that means taking 2-3 minutes, like your favorite song, one favorite song per hour, and having a little dance party just so you're mixing it up, you're getting your movement in, or do like me, do some air squats or drop down and do a plank throughout the day. That non-exercise activity, thermogenesis or fidgeting or NEAT, will keep your metabolism sparked and energized, and make sure you're doing that throughout the day. And with respect to the muscle, if you will, preserving your muscle with weight training, or what they now like to call resistance training, I was just going to share with you from the BMJ, the British Medical Journal. Like, this just came out last month in September of 2025, and it was entitled Effect of Resistance Exercise on Body Composition, Muscle Strength, and Cardiometabolic Health during dietary weight loss in people living with overweight or obesity, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So not surprisingly, what they found, like, this is the duh moment, right? Like, duh, when you lift weights, when you exercise, when you do resistance training, well, guess what happens? It helps. It actually helps. It says, in conclusion, people living with obesity and overweight, with the addition of resistance exercise to dietary restriction, right? They were all on some kind of a diet. It will enhance its beneficial effects. So current evidence, therefore, supports the implementation or adding on into your regimen. It supports the implementation of resistance exercise during weight loss to attenuate the loss of fat-free mass, right? The stuff that we don't want to lose. Fat-free mass would be muscle. We don't want to lose that. So it attenuates or curtails or limits the loss of fat-free mass, or limits the loss of muscle, and increases the loss of fat mass, which is of high certainty. And it also improves muscle strength. So a trifecta here to the positive, right? Like, adding resistance training to dieting does 3 banger things. It's the perfect trifecta. It says it can attenuate or slow down or limit the loss of fat-free mass, which is the loss of muscle. So it slows down muscle loss. It can increase the fat loss, right? Makes you lose more fat, less muscle, and improve muscle strength. Like, that's the freaking holy grail panacea trifecta that you really want, just expressed a month ago in the BMJ, one of the most prestigious medical journals around, right? The British Medical Journal, September of 2025. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. The holy grail panacea. You want to do resistance training. So that's weights of some kind. It can even be body weights. For example, in my clients, if they're not doing any, I'll write them out, out of the gates. We'll do 2 days a week. We'll do 2 days a week resistance training. I would love to get that to 3 or even 4 days a week, but you got to start somewhere. So 2 days a week is nice because if you break it up a little bit and you do one day and then a couple days later do another day, it doesn't feel like an overwhelm to the system. Like, yes, you'll have a little bit of soreness after because you haven't done it in a while. Totally cool, totally normal, but start somewhere. If you need to, start with 1 day a week. And then by the next week, a whole week later, guess what? You're not going to be sore anymore. Well, I'll tell you, here's the cool thing, the way I look about sore. If you're sore, that means you're doing something, right? You got to push yourself. Sometimes you got to do hard things. So start with 1 day a week of resistance training, weightlifting in the gym, or 2 days a week is kind of what I like to recommend, just so your body gets used to it. And then as you get used to it, maybe add another day, do a third day. I try to do 4 days a week, but usually somewhere between that sweet spot of 3 and 4 days. Use your muscle, because here the adage, yes, the adage of use it or lose it definitely applies, and you do not want to lose it. So if you need a specific exercise regimen, you have more questions about that, hit me up over there on Instagram, Dr. Thomas Hemingway, Facebook, Thomas Hemingway, MD, send me an email, go to my website, whatever. I'd love to answer those questions. For folks that work with me, I actually provide them a specific program that they can take with them to the gym. So they're not going there and wandering around. They're literally just hitting these exercises, getting their biggest bang for the buck. And it's always a combination of things like squatting, hinge exercises, push exercises, pull exercises, doing some carrying. I usually just start them with 2 days a week, like I mentioned. 1 day will be the push day, 1 day will be the pull day, and we'll start with that, and then we'll add on to it. So it doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be difficult, but here the adage does definitely apply. Use it or lose it. And so you want to use that muscle mass. You want to grow that muscle mass. You want to keep that muscle mass because that will keep you young. It'll keep you active, energized, and it actually will improve your overall energy levels. Like, you use that muscle and you are fired up. That stuff is turned on. It's working for you all day, day or night, and you're burning calories even while you sleep. It's literally my foundation. I go straight to that. Then I look at zone 2, right? What is zone 2? It's exercise that you can do where you're exerting yourself, but you're not overdoing it, right? It's one of those exercises where it's not like you're running a full-on sprint, but you're running to the point where you're kind of out of breath. And like, if you had to carry a conversation on with your friend, you could do it, but you'd be kind of like, you would getting the words out and you'd be like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. Is awesome. But you're like focusing, like you're pushing it. It's not just a gentle walk. Like, zone 2 is actually, it's an exertion, right? And what's interesting about this is you will be able to govern when you're into zone 2. That's not just a specific heart rate that you're shooting for. And I'm not poo-pooing heart rate monitors. I think they're helpful, but there is no one perfect heart rate that signifies zone 2. Like, if you want to get technical, you actually got to look at your fatty acid oxidation. And that's not something that's super easy to look at. But if you're doing tests like VO2 max and you're measuring these kind of things, you can compute it and calculate it more easily. But what I'm saying here is you don't need anything fancy to measure this. You don't even need a heart rate monitor to measure it, because a heart rate monitor in and of itself will not necessarily give you the answer, because there's a whole spectrum. In fact, there was this article I looked at pretty recently that talked specifically about that, and it was called Zone 2 Intensity, a comparison of individual variability in different submaximal exercise intensity. And so they actually looked at zone 2, and they looked at endurance athletes, and they looked at where their heart rates were. And guess what? These were endurance athletes, and still within zone 2, their heart rates were all across the map. There was no like specific this heart rate pattern. Like, literally they said at the end, um, they said, given the considerable individual variability, the particular markers that the personalized zone 2 prescriptions it was just challenging to make. It said that they couldn't really provide an accurate heart rate number because they were so variable. And then, if they looked at things like the ventilatory threshold and the fat oxidation, like that was a little better, but those are a little bit harder to be able to calculate if you don't have any data, but roughly it correlated with that point at which you're working out and you're a little bit out of breath, but you're not like maximally out of breath to where you can't even get words out. Like you can still get words out, but it's with effort. And that was the best correlator. So I found that super interesting because I love to be able to share with you the things you can do without all the high tech. I love the high tech. I personally have one of these smart watches. I use it. I love to see what my heart rate variability is, more so than I like to see what my heart rate was when I went and did a bike ride or played tennis, or lately it's pickleball if I can sweep that snow off the court and it melts in time, I hit it up and I play pickleball. But what I'm meaning to say is your ability to measure where you are in your activity level, how you feel, how you're breathing. If you're sort of breathing a little hard, but you can still carry on kind of a decent conversation, not full on normal and relaxed like you could on a walk, but if you bring up that amplitude a bit and you go a little faster and you're still able to carry on somewhat of a conversation, that's what we're talking about is zone 2. And that actually is a pretty consistent marker. And if you even want to go a little bit like bonus round, you guys like extra credit, if you were the person in school like me, like, hey, what's the extra credit activity? So the extra credit would be doing the sprinting, 1 or 2 days a week, incorporating some sprinting. I actually did this just about a week ago. I was at this event with my two oldest boys. It was a men's retreat and we were on a farm. And so we were like carrying hay bales, and literally not just carrying, but we were sprinting as fast as we could, carrying hay bales or carrying 60-pound bags of cement or buckets of dirt or rock or whatever it was, these giant tractor tires. Like we were carrying this stuff, but not just a walk and carry. We literally were trying to sprint with this stuff. So it was interesting. It was actually fun. And it just shows you that if you mix it up, you keep your body guessing. And I would say just 1 or 2 days, or just one, if you're just new to this, to add some sprints in. It's very interesting. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see what you can do. Like I was with people, all different age groups. Like a lot of the sons were teenagers or early 20s. And then myself, as you know, I'm in my 50s. And so seeing how my sprinting was compared to their sprinting, I actually really enjoyed it. So if you want bonus round, you want the extra credit, and you're doing your 150 plus, maybe 200 minutes of zone 2 cardio per week, you're doing at least 2 days of resistance training, you want to throw in that little extra bonus round, like do a little bit of sprinting. Super fun. But the third part of that movement is what I briefly touched upon. It's this NEAT, this NEAT, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's kind of those bonus round points you get for fidgeting. Pardon me, had to sip my favorite H2O, a little bit of sprinkle. I got this new mineral salt that I've been using. My friend Rudy over there on the East Coast in Wilmington, he's like, dude, you got to try this kind. It doesn't have all that crappy, flavoring and blah, blah, blah. There's all different electrolyte solutions I've tried over the years. He's like, dude, sprinkle this stuff in, add some lemon or lime juice. And thank you, Rudy. I'm enjoying that so much. It's basically a type of Himalayan pink sea salt with some other minerals. You sprinkle it in, add some, a couple drops of lemon or lime. And not only is it inexpensive, doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't need packets. You can just sprinkle the stuff in at any time, but it's a game changer. So make sure you're hydrated and make sure you're fidgeting throughout the day, right? Your quiet calorie burn is found in this non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this can account for up to 20%. 20% of your daily spend is just doing stuff like I'm doing, standing, just fidgeting around. I showed you my little gripper that I use, my wrist strength thing. Like it literally, those kinds of things. You're walking here and there, you're doing work from your standing desk. Maybe you're choosing the stairs instead of the elevator. Like these kind of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, this could literally account for over 20% of your daily energy spend. So let me just quickly make an outline of what this would look like in your movement template. So let's say you pick 2 days a week for your resistance training, right? That's the thing I talked about first. Use it or lose it. You got to incorporate your muscles, the resistance training. Say a Monday, a Thursday, if you can do full body on each day. That way you have a few days in between to rest, or you can do an upper and lower split. Shoot for, minimum starting as you get into this 2 days a week, and then maybe 3, 4 days a week later, you can even do, I try to do 4 days a week. So I do an upper split, a lower split, and then I repeat that, then do the upper split and lower split. So I'm trying to do 4 days a week in total. Try to do maybe 2 days a week of a solid zone two, say like a 45 to 60 minute zone two brisk walking. Or if you incorporate that into every single day, your bonus round, man, amazing. Like I always walk every single day. If you can do the fidgeting after your meals, do your 10 minutes of fidgeting, whether it be a couple of your favorite songs in a dance party in your home or office work, whatever that is, or just go for a quick walk around the block like I try to do after meals, that 10 minutes, game changing. Game changing. And that's sort of the NEAT, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, where you're not shooting for 30 minutes, you're not shooting for 60 minutes, but you're doing movement throughout the day, whether it's an exercise snack every hour, whatever that is, like amazing. So resistance training, try to hit that first at least 2 days a week. Zone two and maybe a 45, 60-minute interval a couple times a week. Just shoot for 150 to 200 minutes of zone two. If you can throw in a HIIT session, that's the interval training, or the sprinting session once a week, like I did, carrying those funky objects on the farm. Uh, a big aloha out to my friends over at Verde and Verde Farms. That was so much fun to hang out with them and Rudy a couple of weeks ago. Amazing. We got to do some sprinting over there. That was super fun. That was Don and his wife Yvonne of Verde and Verde Farms. That was super fun. And then you just incorporate movement throughout the day, right? The NEAT, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, just being fidgety, moving around, all good. So the next part of this should go without saying, right? If you're trying to lose weight, you got to pay attention to what lies at the tip of your fork, right? What you put in your mouth. So the food strategy that works, I alluded to this. It's got to start with protein. You got to have the minimal amount of protein. And I would say just by and large for all people, all comers, shoot for somewhere around a gram per pound of lean body weight. So if your ideal target lean body weight is, say, for example, in my case, somewhere between 150 and 160, I'm going to shoot for 150-ish, 150, 160 grams of protein per day. So I'm shooting for 50 grams per meal. And I'm telling you, if you don't start your meal with protein, you're going to have a heck of a time fitting that in. Like one of my clients recently is telling me, like, how do I add this extra protein? And what we figured out is as they were starting to do resistance training, it was super cool because they were doing tons of movement throughout the week. I mean, every day this person was achieving like 12, 13,000 steps, but no specific resistance training. We started resistance training. Guess what? After, 30, 45 minutes in the gym, this person was hungry. And I said, oh, perfect. You have the cue. You're hungry after working out of the gym. Pound some protein afterwards. If you're in a hurry, maybe a 30-gram protein shake, or if it's still morning, a couple of eggs, maybe a piece of sausage, grass-fed, whatever that is, just do some protein. Or if you're into the branched chain amino acids after workout, that's fine too. But shoot for protein right after a workout. And so this person was like, oh, cool. I'm working out a couple days a week. I'm adding protein right after the workout and then focusing on getting at least 30 to 35 grams per meal. Boom. My goal with this person was 100 grams per day. So we were shooting for about 35 per meal. And then if there's any extra time for a snack and they needed a little extra boost, we were throwing in like a Greek yogurt with some nuts on top, and maybe if there was a little bit of carbs that were needed, some berries or whatever. But it was simple. We didn't make it complicated, but you got to be consistent with this. Your plate should always be protein favored, protein first. Start with protein. Add in fiber. Fiber is kind of my second fun ingredient. That's like with the meat or the protein, what you're focusing on. Then you add in the veggies because they don't really have any significant net carbs, right? Plus they got tons of what they are called phytochemicals, which are beneficial, whether they be polyphenols or others that are antioxidants, or maybe it's just simple fiber. Maybe you're just eating a fibrous vegetable like asparagus or something like that, Brussels sprouts, and you're feeding your gut. Like the purpose is feeding your second brain or your gut because it needs the fiber. Like super important. I start with protein, then fiber, and then if I'm going to eat some carbs, I'll eat them towards the end of the meal. Or I'll eat them after a workout, right? Because at that point, your body is ready for those carbs. It's ready to fuel that workout. It's ready for the protein. And so I'll add some carbs, but usually it's in the end of the meal, and it's usually favoring things like fresh berries, for example. And the other part is that when you include fat, which I do with every meal, protein, healthy fat, make sure you're including quality fats, right? I kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the podcast, right? We're eating the real stuff, avocados, for example. And if it's an oil, it's an avocado oil, it's an extra virgin olive oil. It's coconut oil, or we're eating macadamia nuts as a snack, or we're eating a half of avocado as a snack, or we're eating nuts, or um, this sort of Mediterranean style diet where we're leaning towards just healthy olive oil as our salad dressing, for example. Like the cool thing about these healthy fats is that not only are they good for you, but they're also satiating, like the protein. When you eat protein first, and say you're on a diet and try to limit your calories, your protein that you put at the beginning of the meal actually fills you up. You don't even have the hunger or desire to keep eating because protein has a satiating effect. Much more, high on the level of satiety than eating carbs. Carbs are like empty, right? Like most of us standard Americans, we have what I would call a calorically high, right? A high calorie, but nutritionally or nutrient poor diet because we're eating a lot of processed stuff that's, white or brown or gray or, it's not colorful. It doesn't have fiber in it, it's just off the shelf. And it's like full of calories, but devoid of nutrition. So what does our brain say? Eat more, eat more. It's just saying, feed me, feed me. The brain wants the nutrition because it's not getting it. So if you start with the nutrition, you start with protein, you start with your veggies, you start with your healthy fats, you're hardly going to even want that many carbs. I mean, I love carbs because they taste good. I love my fruit. I'm never going to stop eating fruit, no matter what any health influencer out there tells me. I love fruit. Fresh fruit for me is always a win. So I'm going to continue to eat my carbs, but it's going to be in the form most of the time of fresh fruit or veggies. Like that's what I love. And you're not going to feel bad about that. And in fact, you can be happy because these give you lots of the phytonutrients and the nutrients that you need that'll help you have the vitality and be healthy and strong and have your immune system cranked up and doing amazing things because you're getting your vitamin C, you're getting your vitamin E, you're getting your polyphenols that are antioxidants. Like all this cool stuff is going to come from those healthy carbs. All right, enough about that. So here's what a practical plate of mine would look like. Obviously, I'm anchoring it first and foremost with protein, 30 to 40 grams at breakfast. Usually that's comprised of eggs of some kind. I often have Greek yogurt. One of the things I sent out an email a couple of weeks ago was like, eat your leftover dinner as breakfast. I love that. Like if I have steak one night and it's leftovers, I'll have steak and egg the next morning because protein first, protein first. Then I'm having some veggies. Maybe it's if it's the morning time, I'm doing a little bit of healthy, fresh, flavorful carbs, which usually comes in the form of berries. Most of the other meals, I'm eating lots of green stuff, whether it be my favorite Brussels sprouts, asparagus, broccolini, cauliflower, like all these things I love, 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 and they have great healthy qualities as well. Sometimes I eat potatoes, honestly, not that often. They're a little bit simple carbs. I like the more complex carbs. Sometimes I'll have some yams or sweet potatoes, but I'm putting that at the end of the meal. And then, of course, I'm always focusing on hydration all the time throughout the day. Because especially if you're trying to lose weight and burn fat, you got to hydrate. Like many times your brain will tell you, oh, I'm hungry, starving, feed me, feed me, feed me. And you know what it is? Oftentimes it's those signals get mixed up in your brain and you just need hydration. You're thirsty, you're feeling dehydrated. And so that's the thing that you actually need. So make sure you hydrate. All right, we're getting close to the end here. Final round. One of my favorite things, and this has been so helpful in the realm of fat loss and getting your weight to where you want, which is what most of my clients want. They want to slim down a bit and get trim and get lean, have increased muscle mass. And one of the missing ingredients for many of them historically has been sleep. Sleep, getting adequate sleep. Because you know what happens if you don't sleep well? Well, not only do you get hangry, angry, not pleasant to be around. This is what I was experiencing for a point in my medical career when I was sleeping 4 hours a night. My wife would remind me, like I'm a naturally pretty happy, positive person. I was a little bit on the grouchy side, a little bit testy, a little bit ornery, or whatever word you choose to use. And it was largely because I wasn't sleeping. And when you're not sleeping, you actually become metabolically unhealthy. You can actually put on more weight, especially the central body weight, the central adiposity, like I was talking about at the beginning, that adipose tissue of the visceral nature, that is often what gets deposited in your body when you're not sleeping well. And that's because of this hormone. You've heard about it. It's called cortisol, right? The stress hormone. When we're not sleeping well, cortisol goes up. When cortisol goes up, you get the moon faces, you get the puffiness in your abdomen and back, and you get this hump back here. That's the cortisol contributing to this visceral adiposity. You don't want that because not only doesn't look awesome, but also it's the metabolically charged in a negative way. It's the inflammatory fat that is comprised in these visceral areas, around the organs, around the gut, the linings, in the panis, as they call it, the apron of the abdomen. This fat, the visceral fat, you don't want. And one of the easy and free, right? We all love free ways to eliminate this is just get a good quality, restful 7 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. So you guys know I've done many, many sleep podcasts. I cherish those couple hours before bed. I try to wind down. I'm not doing any excessive activity, either brain or physical. I try to tone it down. Sometimes I'll take a mellow walk with my wife, mostly just to connect and have some vitamin C time, some connection time. So it might be a light walk. I'm not like pumping heavy weights to right before bedtime. That usually energizes me and keeps me up. If I have a project, I'll do that because I know I need to stay up and kind of get a project done. And so I might throw in some weights to be my exercise snacks because it keeps me lively, keeps me up. But on a normal night, I'm easing down my energy, is activity, I should say, both mental activity as well as physical activity. I'm not trying to solve complex problems. I'm not writing out a bunch of work emails or working on programs or things right before bed. I'm chilling. I'm hanging out with my family. I'm reading a book. I'm meditating. I'm writing in my gratitude journal. Like I'm doing stuff that's like pretty mellow. And I'm turning out those fluorescent lights. In fact, I've replaced almost all of them in my house. And if I can't replace them, I put dimmers on them. And at night, like you'll be walking around in my house, be like, dude, like I have little red night lights everywhere. I love the red light. I have a bunch of headlamps. I even gave them to my kids recently so that they can, if they got to get up in the middle of the night, they can put on their headlamp. It's red light. It's not going to like wake them up to the point where it's going to be hard to go back to sleep. So tune it down. The red lights are favorable. Read a book, gratitude journal. No, bright overhead lighting. No blue light or from the screens. I get off my devices, computers, TVs, all those sorts of things. At least I shoot for 1 hour every night. Ideally, I love to go for 2 hours, but sometimes it's hard. So give yourself a break. Maybe if you're just starting, reducing the blue light at night, just start with 30 minutes. Have a 30-minute hiatus or a curfew, if you will, on your blue light screen time. Like get off 30 minutes before bed. Then maybe after a few weeks, you're getting used to it. No big deal. You get off your screens an hour before bed. If that's going really well and you're having some chill time that you're enjoying at night, you're reading, you're journaling, you're maybe getting in the hot tub or chilling with your partner, your family, cuddling, talking, whatever, and you can get down the blue lights. If you can do 2 full hours, oh my goodness, you're crushing it, right? The 3-2-1, you've heard of it. 3 hours before bed, don't eat, right? Eating keeps you awake. 2 hours before bed, turn off the blue lights. 1 hour before bed, you're sort of chilling. You're decreasing your energetic activities as far as not doing a lot of exercise, not doing a lot of mental gymnastics. You're kind of chilling, you're journaling, you're reading. And in fact, when I say reading, I mean reading something that it's not like my son, if I said reading, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to bust out this math book that's highly complex. It's going to get him, his brain, the wheels turning, so to speak. That's not the kind of reading I'm talking about. I'm thinking about mellow reading, right? Stuff that's not requiring a significant amount of intellect and energy. And then, of course, you can throw in the breath work too, whether it be through prayer, journaling, gratitude, whatever that looks like for you. All right, so that's it. I've covered everything. The last section, I was going to talk a little bit more on GLP-1s. I think I've already really covered that. I would just say if you're on one of those, make sure you're getting enough protein, make sure you're doing resistance training, because don't become a statistic. People are losing anywhere between 20 and 40% of their body weight when they're on these GLP-1s in muscle. Like that is an outrage. In fact, for me, if I had a patient doing that, I would stop the GLP-1 immediately because at the end of the day, they will be less healthy with less muscle mass. Although their weight might be down, they're actually going to be less healthy, less metabolically healthy. They're going to be more frail. They're going to have more chances to later in life get osteopenia, osteoporosis. So if you are losing muscle mass with a GLP, maybe consider a different option. Maybe stop it. Maybe you got to be eating plenty of protein. You got to be doing resistance training because that is, I would say, one of the immediate severe side effects. There's tons of side effects that I don't love, and so I rarely use these things. But if you are using one, you got to make sure you get enough protein. You got to make sure that you're getting enough muscle training, resistance training, weightlifting, working out, pumping iron, if you will. So important. And if you're on one of these meds, you got to be monitoring this with a DEXA scan. I would say minimum every 3 months, like absolute minimum. You got to be looking at this, what you're losing. Hopefully it's just the fat, not the fat-free mass, which is muscle. You don't want to lose muscle, right? I shared that study with you earlier on in this podcast of how you can not lose the muscle through protein first, protein favored diets and resistance training. All right. So we've kind of talked about what this would look like on a schedule. We've talked about nutrition. We've talked about how to put in your movement, schedule it. Talked about the healthy options for protein first eating, the healthy fats, the snacks, hydrating yourself, how important that is. And don't forget the importance of that NEAT activity, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is the movement that you're not really counting towards your 150 minutes of cardio or your 2 to 4 days of resistance training. This is the non-scheduled stuff. This is just working at a standing desk. This is doing air squats. This is doing 10 minutes of movement after each meal. This is doing your so-called activity snacks throughout the day where you're just moving for 2 minutes every hour. Like this is the panacea. Like this is the free stuff, I would say, because you're not having to really schedule it. You don't have to say, I'm going to the gym for this 1 hour or 45 minutes. You just move throughout the day. So I'm going to just share with you a couple of clients I've worked with. One was a 46-year-old executive. He was struggling because he wasn't sleeping well. He had this sort of hypercortisol state where he was depositing his fat around the middle, the so-called visceral fat, which is not the kind that you want. And he felt stuck. He actually had even tried a GLP. He lost some weight, but it didn't really do much for that central adiposity. He still had the fat there. He did lose like 20 pounds on one of these GLPs, but this was before I met him. He hadn't been eating more protein. He hadn't been doing resistance training. So we had to go back to the basics, go back to the basics. So we did, starting with 2 days a week resistance training. We really increased his NEAT activity, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, where I basically had him walk for 10 minutes after every meal. He was blown away at the effectiveness of this. He didn't have to schedule it. He just didn't get on his phone and watch Netflix while he was eating. He ate and then he walked for 10 minutes. And he did this literally religiously after every meal. And it was bonkers how effective this was for him. We also did some incorporation of stress reducing activities. We worked on a couple breath work things. We did box breathing. I remember in particular because he's like, box breathing, what the heck is that? And we kind of went through it. And the box breathing, so simple. He latched onto it. He was doing this strategically throughout the day whenever he needed it. I taught him a 2-minute exercise that literally could change his state when he got riled up with a stressful meeting or a stressful work call, whatever that was. And we got him solid, grounded in that neutral, happy place within 2 minutes. He learned how to do the box breathing, was a game changer. Also, it brought down his cortisol, so he wasn't depositing fat in those places. He lost like 2 inches of his weight in just over a month. Like it was incredible. His weight was about to change, but his waist circumference, he lost 2 inches in his waistline in a month. And that's because he was getting rid of that central adiposity. He was working on increasing his muscle mass. It was literally a game changer. So the biggest things he did was he did resistance training 2 days a week. He did more activities, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which was primarily just walking 10 minutes after a meal. And then we focused on his sleep and his stress optimization. That was it. We didn't really alter too much with his diet. We didn't get any crazy exercise program. Those couple of things were game changing to him. Unbelievable. Here's a last case. We're running out of time. I don't want to keep you too long. I wanted to share, I had worked with recently a 57-year-old that he described to me himself as being skinny fat because like if you just looked at his numbers on the scale, like he was pretty normal weight, but he was pre-diabetic. His A1C was 6. And so his doctor before me was already saying, hey, we got to get you on, one of these insulins or insulin-like meds and whatnot. And I was like, dude, the last thing you want to do is throw a bunch of extra insulin at your body. So we first focused on diet. We went to, like I shared about a week or two ago, how the low carbohydrate diets can successfully basically eliminate type 2 diabetes. Really, in most cases, your type 2 diabetes can resolve, be cured, be done away with if you focus on real food and a low carb index real food. Like it's been shown, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of studies that look at this. And so we got his protein up. We were doing about 2 grams per pound, I should say, of lean body mass. And so he was, I think in the beginning, his weight was about 170. So that's about 70 something kilos. We focused in him So that was what, 170 pounds, 170 grams. I think his lean body mass ideal was 160. So we were focused on 160 grams of protein a day. He was basically doing 55 to 60 grams per meal, roughly about 55 per meal. And then we threw in a snack in the afternoon, which was Greek yogurt. And as he increased his protein, he reduced his carbs and he added in consistently 150 to 200 minutes of zone 2 cardio and resistance training. Once again, he just started with 2 days a week. Like over the initial couple of months, he had a second DEXA and his visceral adipose tissue went, it went way down. Like I said, his waist size decreased by 2 inches. His A1C came down from 6 all the way down to 5 point. It was almost 5.5. It was like roughly 5.56 or something. It was just a little bit less than 5.6, but significantly. But more than that, he felt better. He was way more energized. And when he looked at himself in the mirror, like he was proud of himself. His waistline had tightened up. He got, bigger muscles. Like he was super pumped. And it was so simple what we did. We made protein forward or protein first his diet. We focused on 160 grams of protein per day, made sure he got a zone 2 cardio, at least 150 minutes a week, 2 days of resistance training, and boom, game changing for him, game changing for him. So what I want to share is that this stuff works. It's successful. It doesn't have to be complicated. And most of this is largely free, right? You can move your body every day. You can choose to do resistance training. You can focus on what is at the tip of your fork and do a protein first, protein heavy diet. Make sure you're getting 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So for most of us, it's between about 100 and 150 grams of protein per day, somewhere between 30 and 50 per meal. You got to monitor it because what you don't monitor, you can't, what you don't measure, you can't monitor, can't manipulate, you can't pay attention to. So you got to measure it. So either get an app or get a notebook, figure out how much protein you're eating. Make sure you're eating between 30 and 50 grams per meal and 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Eat the protein first at the beginning of the meal. Make sure you're getting your movement in. Make sure you don't forget about sleeping, right? 7 to 9 hours, high quality sleep, and optimizing your stress with the breathing, box breathing, taking little breaks throughout the day to sit, close your eyes, focus on your heart, do 2 minutes of box breathing or whatever breathwork pattern works for you to get into that centered state where not only do you feel amazing, but actually that's the state where you make the best decisions. So it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it can be very powerful. So if you need more help with this, feel free to reach out to me, Dr. Thomas Hemingway, Insta, Thomas Hemingway, MD, Facebook, ThomasHemingway.com. I'd love to help you out, work with you. Let me know what you're loving and learning. And don't forget to share. Until next time, aloha.